The following message by Pastor Dennis Clark and Dr. Jennifer Clark is brought to you by Full Stature Ministries and its supporters. For more information about Full Stature Ministries, please visit forgive123.com. That's forgive123.com.
Well, we are delighted to announce that we have received our shipment of the 2 new book releases that you can only purchase from us until May 2nd, but Abiding in the Secret Place, Practical Keys to Practicing the Presence of God in Your Everyday Life, and Simple Prayer, a guided journal to quiet your soul, connect with God, and abide in His presence. Now, this book, Abiding in the Secret Place, half of the book is our writing about the secret place, and the second half is the complete writings of Brother Lawrence, the 16th century monk who had such a relationship with God that the compilation of his people would come and see him just to be in his presence. He walked in so much peace and love, and everything he did it as love to God. And you know that love is not a mental concept, it's an actual flow out of the heart. So those are available in the bookstore now. Now, what we're going to be doing today is something a little bit different. Most of you know that we have 3 children's books. The Great God Quest series. The first children's book is The Beginning. It tells the story of how a little boy named Gray becomes a little boy named Gold, and he turns gold in the book. And you know gold is divine nature, right? The second book is Forgiveness and the God Emotions. It tells the story of how Gold crosses the Jesus Bridge into God country and then learns how to stay there. And the third book that we'll be covering this morning is The Great God Quest, Gold Goes to the School of the Spirit, which is written in chapters or lessons designed for the children to study. And all of these books we have taught at a Christian school, and there is a teacher at a local Christian school who teaches these books to her students in her elementary school classroom every single year. And so I'm going to share with you some of the comments that she made on the impact the book has made on her life through working with the children. Now, I'm going to be teaching the book from lesson plans that are developed to teach children in Christian schools and teach in Sunday schools. And the lesson plans for Gold Goes to the School of the Spirit, we have ages 7 through 12 because those are the ages that the teacher worked with. And when Dennis and I taught at the school, they had us work with the little ones and then do chapels to teach the middle school and the high school students. So every child in that school learned how to forgive. And so the lessons in the lesson plans, which correspond to the book, are 1, crossing the Jesus Bridge, 2, location, 3, the bucket, 4, God emotions, 5, Jesus the forgiver. Lessons 6, 7, and 8 are the fruit of the Spirit, parts 1, 2, and 3. Lesson 9 is dealing with scary things, and 10 is dealing with pesky thoughts. So we're just going to start a little bit and go through the book. I'd made the comment that we had never taught on the fruit of the Spirit the way it's taught in the children's book. So guess what? You guys are going to learn some new things this morning. Now, about the lesson plans, the objectives of the lesson plans in the book are to teach children how to know, feel, and experience God and His forgiveness. Now, we begin by teaching about salvation, of course. In all three of the books, if somebody started with just that book, they would begin with making sure the children are saved, because we know that you can't tap into the fruit of the Spirit, you can't rely on Jesus as the forgiver in you unless he has actually come into your heart. So what we use is the Jesus Bridge. I don't know if you've ever seen a tract or the picture in the children's books where you have God over here and man over here, and a great chasm between the two, kind of like what the Didache talks about. And the only way that God can come to man and man can come to God is through the cross of Jesus in the middle, and that's what bridges the chasm. And we have pictures in the book of the Jesus Bridge and entering into God country, and that's the one with the beautiful castle on the front of it, the second book, Forgiveness and the God Emotions. But we have fantastic news. Jason has announced that he feels the prompting of the Lord to do the illustrations in the children's books. And I mean, he's amazing. He said that he's not worked with color before. He's worked primarily with pencil and black and white. But what he has done so far is just absolutely beautiful. Many of you know, because I've been running around showing everybody as soon as he sends us something. But I think that's very exciting. And I'll tell you what, a few months ago I had a dream, and I had to learn to do some graphics to illustrate the children's books originally, and it actually gets a little better as you go through the books because I was learning, but it's nothing like a real artist could do. And so I am just thrilled. But a few months ago, God was showing me these children's books, and the art was just so beautiful. And so I said to the Lord, I said, I can't do that. And then I woke up. And so I figured either God was going to give me some special talent that he was going to infuse into me, or I didn't know what. But of course I knew he was chuckling because I wasn't going to have to do the illustrating. It's going to be Jason who's going to be doing it. So this is all very exciting. And I would, if this weren't the case, I would have the children's books up here to show you. But they are soon to be outdated and improved magnificently. So anyway, in Forgiveness and the God Emotions, you see crossing the Jesus Bridge over into God country. Now, let's see. In the lesson, it says, begin by teaching about salvation. When we're saved, we can live in the realm where God resides, which we call God country. It says the children will learn the difference between feeling the fruit of the Spirit and feeling toxic emotions. In God country, we feel the fruit of the Spirit in our emotions. If we make a detour out of God country, we experience unpleasant emotions such as hurt, fear, anger, guilt, and shame. And then the children will learn how to go to Jesus the forgiver and let him deal with toxic emotions. When children finish with this series, they will be equipped to live their Christian life without accumulating negative emotional baggage. And I have been so thrilled, particularly on working on these lessons and everything, that I think the teacher over there has been teaching the children about 10 years now. Do you realize how many children she has equipped to live life in the Spirit? And what's more, they actually practice it in the classroom. One of the stories she told me was, and we have a children's blue card. Everybody knows the blue card that explains how to first feel and forgive. Now, on the back of this blue card, it doesn't have the explanation, but in the classroom itself, she had them make their own cards with first, feel, and forgive, which they affixed to tongue depressors with the, like, first should be written on the back, first person or situation that comes to mind, then feel the emotion, and then let Jesus the forgiver go to it and through it. And these were their flashcards that they had in class for practicing. So anyway, they had done that, but two little girls were fighting, really picking on one another in her classroom. She called them up to the front. She handed them a blue card, and she said, "You know the drill. Go out in the hall and come back in when you've resolved this." And they came back smiling and friends again. So she is really equipping those students. And then I'm going to actually be reading some of the comments, which is Dennis had me go through and compile all the comments and print them out and take them to our pastors' meeting last week. And it's really, I'd glanced at them before, but when they were put all together, it was really very moving. Okay, so when they go through the lessons, they read the pages, appropriate pages out of the book, and she mentions the practice sessions interspersed all the way through the book, where they actually practice how to do what is in the book. And she said that it's very important to take time to let the children experience the practice sessions. Now, here she talks about long-term goals. The Clarks have mastered the art of how to deeply forgive and receive emotional healing. This is a lifelong skill with lasting benefits. Each child should be able to master how to drop down and forgive. Another benefit is living in supernatural peace with God. Each child should be able to recognize when they are out of that peace. If mastered, it will be an invaluable tool for the rest of their lives. My life has been dramatically changed by these materials. One key that is so freeing may present a stumbling block for some adults. We have been taught that we have to forgive. The Clarks teach you that you allow Jesus the forgiver to do it for you. We must see this as the same divine exchange we can have when we allowed Jesus to save us. Jesus does the saving. He washes our sins away. We receive his righteousness in exchange. Now, when I have conflict in the classroom, it becomes an opportunity to reinforce the forgiveness that brings true peace. So, crossing the Jesus Bridge, I don't think we need to go into that at great depth. But when we did this at Harvest Fest, we were asked to take several days and teach the children over at Harvest Fest, and we took them through the books over there. And when we did the Jesus Bridge, we actually had a bridge set up, or a path or a way that the children would cross over to salvation. And I believe all the children accepted Jesus at that Harvest Fest. And then, of course, we took them through everything that we're going through today. And they had a fantastic time. It was a lot of fun working with them. And we ended up having lots of grandmothers come into the class, and they were interested in what we were teaching and very motivated to learn this to work with their grandchildren. So that was an exciting occurrence at that Harvest Fest. So an exercise at the end of this, well, the teachers at the beginning should give their personal testimony. And that will introduce salvation for the students. And then the students are then encouraged to draw a picture of crossing over the Jesus Bridge into God country. The second lesson is location, and the objective of that is to learn the location of the Bible heart, the conscience, the emotions, the thoughts the door, the spirit, and their will. And you notice there was one time I pointed to my head, and that's for thoughts. Otherwise, everything good that takes place in our heart in the Bible. And we know that that Jesus. Why would you take a word that Jesus used in the actual Greek and think you could improve upon it? That it just amazes me that after the King James, the translations of the Bible kept saying heart in John 7:30, 7:38, there where Jesus said, out of your belly will flow rivers of living water. He actually used the word koilia in the Greek, which means the belly. And so everywhere you go, you see believers touching their chest area to reference the heart. One of the worst things I saw was when we were going to France. I wanted to go through some of the Bible translations because I know some French, and I wanted to see what the French translation said, and I didn't find one that didn't say hard except one, which said, out of your chest will flow rivers of living water. That was the worst of all. So I am so glad that for about the first 10 years of my Christian life, I read the King James, which uses belly. So when Dennis taught me about functioning from the gut, immediately I said, that's why Jesus used that word. Do you think there might be a lot more believers who would catch on to location if they had kept the original Greek? And it talks about, in the King James, it talks about bowels of compassion. Of course, it's all the way through the Hebrew Old Testament too, referring to the innermost being, the spirit of man. It searches all the inner rooms of the belly. It uses the word belly. The Hebrews understood location. So this is invariably where we have to start teaching adults and children. Now, unlike adults who have to be re-educated, children catch on immediately because they haven't learned it wrong for 5, 10, 15, 20 or more years. So we know that in the Bible heart, when you do something wrong, you feel it in your gut. Your conscience is located down here. This is physiologically not only the spiritual seat of the emotions, but this is physiologically the seat of the emotions. And we know here that in 1999, Dr. Michael Gershon published a book about the second brain. And he had discovered that we have a separate autonomous nervous system in our gut called the enteric nervous system, and it's our emotional processor. So we have the thinking brain in our head and the emotional brain in our gut. No wonder so many digestive conditions are directly caused by suppressed toxic emotions. So much so, and I would love to talk to Michael Gershon someday, so much so, now he's a gastroenterologist, and now he teaches forgiveness for dealing with the buried toxic emotions that are causing people so much digestive upset. And so, really, if you are bothered by digestive problems, the first place you ought to go is asking the Lord for self judgments about yourself with the negativity still buried in your emotional system, because we know that emotions don't die, they get buried alive. Now, unfortunately, Dr. Gershon does not know Jesus, and he does not understand about Jesus the forgiver, but he is on track. Now, the emotional brain is connected with your thinking brain by the left vagus nerve, which goes to the limbic system, the emotional center in the brain, but the thinking brain doesn't tell our gut how we feel. The enteric nervous system informs our brain what we are feeling. So emotional information goes up not down. And by the way, there are multi-millions of neurons in our enteric nervous system, which forms the lining of our bowels, our intestines, our stomach, our esophagus. So you can guess why emotions would impact your digestion. But multi-millions in our central nervous system, multi-millions in our enteric nervous system, and about 40,000 in our physical heart. In other words, computer, computer, computer chip. So now emotions, of course, can affect the heart, but the physical heart does not play much of a role in this. People's emotions can, of course, affect their blood pressure and heart rate and so forth, but that is not your emotional processor, contrary to what most believers think. Okay, so when we talk about Bible heart, then as opposed to any other location people might choose for heart, it's definitely not your head. I think most people would know that. Let's hope most people would figure out that their heart's not in their head. But you never know with people. So anyway, we say Bible heart based on what does the Bible actually say about the location of the heart. And so that's what we base that on. So we go back into for the adults, we go back into the Hebrew and the Greek and that sort of thing and lay a foundation. And there's only one time the physical heart is referenced in the New Testament, when it talks about times will get so bad that men's hearts will fail for fear. Now, it doesn't actually use the word for heart, cardia, there. It uses the word apasuko, which means heart failure. But anytime that cardia is used in the New Testament Greek, it's referring to spiritual heart, what we call the Bible heart. Now, of course, we learn the door of the heart, which is your will. And most believers think their will is in their head. No, it's your heart that opens and gives. Your head may consent, but your heart opens to God, opens to people, opens to choices you make through your will down here. And if you can open something, you can also close the door of your heart. Now, at some point, I prayed the sinner's prayer. When I first got saved, I found a tract at my parents' house. And when I first got saved, I didn't have a person to talk to. So I just kept praying the sinner's prayer every day. And at some point during those first few months, I must have, without knowing what I was doing, opened my heart to Jesus. So people can pray the sinner's prayer with a closed heart and end up going to church for years and not be saved, not understanding location. Jesus says, I stand at the door and knock. Now, that verse is used for speaking to churches, but we know that Jesus doesn't stand outside and speak to that physical door back there, that it takes individuals or a group of individuals to open the door that Jesus is talking about. And so it is, I do not have a problem with people using that for leading somebody to salvation, opening the door of the heart. Because of that, he doesn't stand outside and ask the wooden doors to open. So, and here's the practice that the children learn right off the bat. Now, this is after they've crossed the Jesus bridge. The first practice is drop down. That actually came from Dennis telling me to get out of your head. The first year we were married, I've said I was like a yo-yo, up and down, up and down, up and down. Open my heart, close my heart, get up my head, start worrying. And so he would tell me drop down, and we use bucket now. Drop the bucket down, because it says that that the heart of man is, there's like water in a deep well, and that we can access that well. So drop down, close your eyes, and pray for the children. pay attention to Jesus in your heart. And we had a Sunday school teacher up in New England who said that the children were more likely to say, when she asked, how does that feel? They were more likely to say, good, than peace. So, and then we had somebody from this area who was going through this with her child, and the child said, it feels like rainbows. Isn't that cute? And then you can explain to them that that is the peace of God. That is the presence of Jesus himself with you. That's what you feel when you're with Jesus. Now, Jesus never goes anywhere once he comes in. He gave you peace as a gift. He never takes it away. But we can wander out of God country and lose that sense of feeling the peace of his presence. And we know that he himself is our peace. So we're feeling the presence of Jesus when we feel his peace. And then it explains when you feel God's peace, or you feel that good feeling, you're feeling God's emotions, the fruit of the Spirit. And then there's some exercises for the children to do. And one exercise, of course, most obvious is point to your thoughts, point to your conscience, point to the door, point to the seat of emotions. And then there's some activities that the children have to do where they can draw lines to the different parts. And of course, we know that there's only one line that gets drawn to the head, and that's thoughts. So the next lesson is the bucket. And part of the bucket lesson is to give each child a picture of Bucket Man and put like a crank with a rope up here and thread a thread from the back of the card out of Bucket Man's head and tie a bucket to the end of the string or the rope, and you can pull the bucket up and down. And when we taught, it was so cute that one of the little children said they were talking about the living water that's in your heart. And one little child said, everyone knows there's no living water in your head. It was very, very cute. So the bucket itself is our focus. What are we focused on? What are we paying attention to? So our bucket, our focus drops down. This was one of the first things Dennis did with me. He had me sit down, close my eyes, and later he explained to me that when you close your eyes and think of Jesus, most believers actually get in an attitude of prayer. And then I think it was a few days after that, he had me drop down to my spirit, feeling the presence of Jesus. And he said, okay, now stay there with the door of your heart open and open your eyes and look around the room. And it felt really strange. So I think I was totally living in my head almost all the time. But see, this is what we're supposed to do. Dennis calls it dual awareness, to be able to function in the world, but keep our focus on Jesus. And that way, he can impact the world through us. Out of your belly will flow rivers of living water when we stay dropped down, when we stay centered. The book that just came out is The Secret Place. The secret place is where we drop our bucket down. And we would do exercises, and I encourage this because I hate to say this, but people have seen spiritually like rivers of living water flowing from the base of the temple flowing out into the community. And of course, we've had a couple of flood events after that. So anyway, but Dennis and I would practice. We'd go to the mall or someplace and let rivers of love, without saying a word, without approaching anybody, just let rivers of love flow out to whoever seemed to be standing out. whoever the Lord pointed out to us. And as we stood there and let love flow, as often as not, that person would come up and strike up a conversation and talk to us with tears in their eyes. Let's blast. Let's go out and do an exercise this weekend. Go around blasting Charlotte and Fort Mill with the love of God. So Bucket Man, and I think that's an ideal lesson for children, but it's an ideal lesson for us to learn that when our bucket is up, the door of our heart's closed, and we don't have access to living water. But when our bucket is down, the door of our heart opens, and we can experience living water, but we can also let living water flow out to bless other people. And so we have a drop-down activity. Draw a line to the area of focus, and then we have bucket up and bucket down. If the door is closed, where's your bucket? If your bucket's full of living water, where's your bucket? Down, right? And so the children get to practice all of this. But here are teacher insights from the Bucket Man lesson. But I probably ought to call it, maybe I should call him Bucket Boy. Jason's done such a cute version of the little guy. So the true value here, though, is that the children learn how to drop down. This is a tool they could use for the rest of their lives if they learn it well enough. I use dropping down almost every time there's a conflict in my classroom. I offer it to children who come to me with emotional hurts. Not every child takes it, but the ones who do feel relief and are able to return to whatever learning is at hand instead of sulking. I also use dropping down when I need my peace back in the classroom. If things are just going wrong, I will stop the class and say that I need to drop down and get my peace back and suggest that we all do it together. The atmosphere in the classroom changes and we are able to return to stress-free living. This lesson is so valuable to the entire study. As a child, I was taught that my will, emotions, and conscience were in my head. The Clarks have correctly identified the best way to feel emotions, conscience, and the will. And then in her comments, she mentions the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve connects to the stomach and abdominal organs. We can easily feel fear in our gut, and most children can easily relate this to some experience of fear they had. When you train yourself to pay attention to what your gut is saying instead of your head, you can live in a state of peace all the time. This is one of the rewards of learning these principles. And until I read her comments, I had no idea what an impact this had had on this teacher and her class. Now, the next lesson is the God emotions. Now, objectives to help children understand their emotions and know the difference between God's peace and unpleasant emotions. Second, to have the children experience God's peace and to gain sensitivity to feeling that peace. Thirdly, to recognize when they have peace and when they don't. And the lesson says, are you happy sometimes? Are you sad or angry sometimes? Did you know that in the beginning, before Adam and Eve sinned and ate the bad fruit, they only felt the love of God? What we call the love of God is expressed in various ways. After Adam and Eve ate the bad fruit, they felt what we call bad emotions for the first time. They felt afraid, rejected, angry, guilty, and ashamed. Does anyone like those feelings? We will all be learning about the fruit of the Spirit in this series of lessons. When we were there and we asked the children, so, where did bad emotions come from? The children in unison said, the devil. Now, what's funny is when we asked that to a room full of adults, they looked like deer in headlights. Interesting. It's the the re-education of adults, the education of children, the re-education of adults. And one of my dreams is that this get out to schools and Sunday schools around the world, and that we could have a generation growing up without the bad emotional baggage that most of us accumulated throughout our lives. To have a generation growing up free. Wouldn't that be wonderful? That's actually one reason for the children's books in the first place, because of that dream. So now we know that there's one fruit, love, but then the Bible talks about the fruit of the Spirit. And let's see. We know that God is love. He's deposited His love in our hearts. The love of God has been poured out in our hearts by the Holy Spirit who was given to us. That's Romans 5:5. So that tells us, just like Jesus gave us a gift of peace, God has poured His love into our hearts. The kingdom of God is righteousness, peace, and joy in the Holy Spirit. When Jesus rules, righteousness, peace, and joy are evidence that His kingdom has come and is accessible within us. Now, somebody said, well, two of those are emotional. Peace and joy are emotional. Actually, righteousness is emotional too, because righteousness is the love of God in action. So love, joy, peace. We know God is love, and love is the source of everything done by God. Now in Galatians 5:22 and 23, it says, the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control, and against such things there is no law. Now notice that the word fruit is singular here. Love is one fruit. One fruit expressed in a variety of different ways. Joy is love rejoicing. Peace is love ruling and resting. Patience is love enduring. Kindness is love caring for others. Goodness is love motivating us to do what is right. And we know that love sometimes must confront as well as just being kind. Meekness is love esteeming, putting others first. And self-control is love restraining our behavior. So we know some other verses we talked about that Jesus gave us peace. My peace I give to you, John 14:27. And go back to the verse that we used when the children crossed the Jesus bridge, is Colossians 1:13. God the Father has delivered us from the power of darkness, that's everything that came from the kingdom of the enemy, and conveyed or taken us into the kingdom of the Son of His love. But is there anyone in here who perfectly practices the fruit of the Spirit all the time and never makes a detour into the devil's kingdom? Well, I haven't met anybody yet who's still on the earth. So Jesus in heaven, of course, and the saints in heaven, I believe, have been delivered from the devil's kingdom, his influence. But what we do is we want the children to recognize the good, the God emotions and the enemy's emotions. And one exercise we have them do is have a card with God country, God's emotions on one side, and not God country, bad feelings on the other, and have the children either make a list for the older children or have a discussion and have the children discuss what are some good feelings and what are some bad feelings. And so we have a God country, not God country chart, and teach them that that's how that your emotions are your friends, because they will immediately tell you, or if you're in the devil's country or in God's country. And this is the way we know. Dennis uses the example of Big Bird walking in the room with a big sign saying, Jesus isn't ruling right now. When you're under the influence of the fruit of the Spirit, which is the love of God, the various expressions, you know that Jesus is ruling. You know you're connected properly to the kingdom of heaven, to the kingdom of God. And we talk about peace. Now, we want the children to get their peace when they forgive. So we make the point that the river of peace that flows through God country includes all the emotions given by God, the fruit of the Spirit. So that's a very important point to make when teaching this. And then we have some exercises where we teach the children about different emotions. We have emotion activities. Oh, one that's really funny. For the younger kids, you can have some faces with, like smiling faces, angry faces, different emotions, and go through that with the children. But for the older kids, you give them blank faces. And they draw the emotions, and we saw some hilarious pictures. Which one was it where we had, which emotion was it? Angry, with like a volcano coming out of the head, and stuff like that. So, I mean, they really got into it. But the goal was to help them understand their bad emotions, and the older children obviously understood their bad emotions really well. So very expressive. So here are teacher insights. It's very important for the children to grasp checking their belly for peace. This is a key to their connection with God. The Clark's materials for adults go into this more thoroughly. Their book, Live Free, and of course most of our other books, covers the biblical foundations and builds the background as to why the belly is our spiritual heart and connection to God. And then she quotes a paragraph from Live Free. Most of us will be surprised to learn that our belly or gut is not only the seat of our spirit and emotion, but also of our conscience, intention, and will, the faculties of choice and decision making. Willpower, self discipline, and self control are among the most misunderstood and misapplied concepts in the Christian life, leading to a faith walk governed by striving and self effort. Understanding the location of our will and how to yield our will are two of the most powerful lessons we can ever learn as followers of Jesus. This is the key to the Clark's teaching because it gives you a specific how on the transformative work of eliminating negative emotions and developing peace. And can you imagine learning this in elementary school and having it reinforced regularly in your classroom experience? Because we said before that practice makes permanent, that you can learn these principles and learn how to do them and then go back to living your Christian life the same way you did before you ever learned them, which would be out of your head, not dealing with toxic emotions, at which point you would just be accumulating them. And last week, Dennis read the list of the positive effects from forgiveness and the toxic effects of unforgiveness, and how it brings damage to every aspect of our lives, even physical health. Now, it's been said that 85 to 90% of all physical sickness and disease can be attributed in some measure to toxic emotions, because the emotions don't go away, they're just stored within us. And we can't, well, it's the mind body connection, the mind gut connection. So many people are writing on this now that we can't keep our thoughts compartmentalized over here and our emotions here and our physical body here. We're part of an integrated system. One of the things I've been having people do recently is spend some time regularly asking the Lord to show you judgments you've made against yourself. The first year Jason came, by the way, I don't think he prayed for physical health at all, he says, but he did go through the 60-day challenge 4 times the first year. And in the process, all his allergies were healed. He said that he had been allergic to everything. He was allergic to feathers. He was allergic to cats, to dogs, to cleaning products, to all sorts of nuts and vegetables and fruits. And he can eat whatever he wants now. His nut allergies went away just by dealing with those self-judgments. So, and I've taught in here that we were up in New England, and of course I thought it was the dry air of the New England winter causing crusty patches on my skin. Got back and I learned that it was eczema, and I said, oh, okay, well that's autoimmune. That means praise God. We can just go to God and remove the toxic emotions. And so I didn't even tell Dennis I was doing this, but I was in our prayer time, and God showed me a specific situation from elementary school where I had wanted to be friends with some little girls, but they didn't want to include me in their little group. And so I had taken in the self-judgment, there must be something wrong with me. Well, I forgave those little girls, received forgiveness for taking that in, dealt with the lie, and I didn't mention this to Dennis, but I noticed over the next couple of weeks all those skin patches cleared up. And then I had to keep my skin from being so dry, I was using something that's a substitute for soap. It's not really a soap. And I had that in the shower, and Dennis walked into the bathroom and looked over there at that soap and non-soap soap. And the Lord told Dennis, I've healed Jennifer's skin. Well, that's wonderful, right? Well, the horrifying part is I had kept that in my heart for 45 years before it manifested and was affecting my health. So you don't know what's still dormant inside you. So I would suggest that as we're moving toward health and healing in this group, that get serious and ask the Lord to show you self-judgments. And it doesn't have to be a big thing to manifest. That may sound like a little thing with those girls in elementary school, but it could be something that happened and you were just ashamed of yourself, bad behavior or something. These things can seem very small and be very subtle and yet have a major impact on health. So we want to be a healed and healthy group here. So we don't want to be the cause of our own illness, right? So the next lesson, lesson 5, is Jesus the Forgiver. Now, the teacher here had the students make, I can get this out of here, had them make little flashcards, except she had them glue them to tongue depressors, and they had the explanation on the back for first, feel, and forgive. And then they would practice in the classroom. So the objective of this is to learn to forgive in a way that brings emotional healing, to learn who we need to forgive. And she says, have you ever forgiven someone? Was it easy or hard? Today we will learn how to forgive the Jesus way. And so they make their cards and then they practice in the classroom. And she has, this teacher made a, well, let me read that verse to you. In a lot of our books, we begin with 2 Corinthians 10, 4 and 5 in the Message, which says, it's not, the verse, most of us are used to the weapons of our warfare verse. But in the Message, it says, we use our powerful God tools for fitting every loose thought and emotion and impulse, there's mind, will, and emotions, into the structure of life shaped by Jesus. Our tools are ready at hand for clearing the ground of every obstruction and building lives of obedience unto maturity. She actually made a God tool set for her class that she showed me. We don't have that, but I mean, it had like hammers and different tools and what those were. And so, very, very creative and imaginative there. But we call learning how to do the forgiveness and use the equipment that God has given all of us is learning to use our God tools. And the students really like that. She has done many other activities. I'm actually quite impressed by how she's brought this into such a living reality in the lives of her students. So, in the children's book, it has different practices. She asks the children, what is first feel forgive? What happens to the bad feelings in us if we don't forgive? What happens to the bad feeling when we do forgive? Why is it good to get rid of bad feelings? And so there's a number of practices in the children's book. There's a first feel forgive practice. Then there's practice forgiving other people. There's a practice for receiving forgiveness for yourself. And then there's a practice for forgiving God. And some people say, well, why would we need to forgive God? Well, God is perfect. God never does anything wrong, but we sure can get mad at him. And in the children's exercise, it says, in prayer, think of a time you were angry or disappointed because things didn't go the way you wanted them to go. Sounds like the children of Israel in the wilderness, doesn't it? Except it didn't stop in the wilderness, it's continued until today. So you do first feel forgive, let Jesus forgive through you, and then it has an exercise to let it go. That thing you wanted, that expectation you had, that thing you wanted to happen that didn't happen, or the thing you didn't want to happen that did happen, let it go from your heart. Release it into the loving hands of God. Release other people into God's hands. When you feel peace, you really let it go. There's no pull there. When forgiveness becomes a habit, your students will be able to free themselves of toxic emotions for the rest of their life. This is a lifelong tool you're teaching the children. The more you can practice this skill, the more they will use it in their everyday lives. They say it takes 21 days of consciously practicing something before it becomes a habit. Anytime you can interject this first feel forgive into the school day will help it become a useful tool. Now, we know children who learn this in Sunday school here, and they were out in their neighborhood helping the children, teaching this to the children in their neighborhood, helping them forgive, helping them deal with fears and various things. And what evangelism, huh? To not only teach about Jesus, but to teach how to go to Jesus and actually accomplish something in someone's heart. They became those little children who were taught here became little evangelists, helping other people. Wouldn't it be awesome if this would spread to more Sunday schools and churches? And so, next, 3 lessons on the fruit of the Spirit. Now, the fruit of the Spirit, part 1. Love, joy, and peace. And of course, the children had a chart that they kept to use for reference, and there was an exercise for making flashcards on the fruit of the Spirit. And I used the fruit, I heard Bob Jones teach on this, so I used the order of the fruit that he suggested. I made one change. For joy, I used the grapes instead of whatever fruit he said, and that's because one of the verses of our church is there's new wine in the cluster. That's Isaiah 65, verse 8, I believe. And of course, we know that the new wine includes the joy, and in his presence there's fullness of joy, and in your joy there's pleasure. In your joy there's something about the river and pleasures forevermore, or delight forevermore, depending on what lesson. So anyway, that's why the grape is joy. And the first, they also learned the pest. Now, what to watch out for in your life that destroys the fruit. And they had little pictures with bugs, various bugs that was the pest for the fruit. So the first fruits, I was looking for where it is in this lesson. Maybe I need to add it, that love, joy, and peace are primarily our gifts to God. That we we love God by worshiping Him. We have an exercise where we let worship flow out without words, because it's not, singing and letting the love flow out is good, but the love, joy, and peace are exercised in our relationship to God. And these are gifts that we can give Him, that these we can present to Him in our worship, in our prayer, in our daily attitude. We know, if you've read the Brother Lawrence, The Practice of the Presence of God, or our new book, Abiding in the Secret Place, you'll learn that we can practice loving God with every action that we take. And that is how Brother Lawrence lived. Peace is good, but you can actually take it to a higher level and practice loving God when you do something and letting it flow out. And then joy and peace. Peace lets us know that He is with us. Jesus Himself is our peace. So now, the pest on these, and this is in our children's book, The School of the Spirit. It goes into this at length, and the children really should learn 3 a week. If they're doing this in Sunday school, they should learn 3 a week, or it'll be too much to take in and remember. But the orange is the fruit of love. And in the book, they learn why the orange is that. The grapes are joy. The apple is peace. Now, the pest of love is selfishness. Why? Because selfishness is not God and other-centered. Selfishness is self-centered. It's centered towards yourself, what you want to grasp or get. If you're turned into self, you're not letting love flow out to God and to others. The grape, or joy, what is the pest that spoils joy? It's self-pity. One way to instantly feel joy is to drop down to your spirit and think of something you're grateful for. And of course, every good thing we're grateful to God. But when you get into self-pity, it's actually anger, a form of anger toward God. And the kids said, self-pity, that's a pity party. No one wants to go to that party. So I was really surprised, because the first time we taught this, how much they got into it. But we teach them not just concepts, but how to actually feel, and let them practice feeling the emotions. And the apple, peace. And what's the pest that spoils peace? Worry. And it takes as much energy to pray as to worry. So if you translate your worry, which is fear, that's right, the base, that's the foundation of the devil's kingdom. So don't indulge in the devil's kingdom. It spoils your peace. It's the wrong kingdom. So we had exercises on practicing love. And so we will get into those exercises next week. But I would like to share this. Seeing the negative side of the fruits, the pests, helped some of my children to correct behavior they didn't think was wrong. When tattling was shown as a test for faithfulness, one of my excessive tattlers curbed her habit. I find most of the children think things through very carefully when they are given new information. Also, the first 3 fruits are fruits we can give to God as gifts. We can return love, we can express joy to Him in our praise, we can live in a state of peace, which allows us to be continually yielded to Him. So practice love, joy, and peace this week.
You've been listening to Pastor Dennis Clark and Dr. Jennifer Clark of Full Stature Ministries at Forgive123.com. Full Stature Ministries reserve all copyright protections under applicable law. Our copyright policy is available at our website, Forgive123.com. For more information about Full Stature Ministries and additional life-transforming materials, please visit Forgive123.com.